Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the board meeting today. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5 p.m. If we can please stand, sorry, roll call, please.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval.
Here.
Ms. Alvariano.
Here.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Here.
Ms. Sarah Turner and Mr. Neil Patel are not present.
Okay. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to move forward to the approval of the board agenda. If I can please get a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval.
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano.
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, today on closed session, we have 2.1 potential litigation under Government Code Section 54956.8 and 54956.9. We also have item 2.2, public employee appointment / employment under Government Code Section 54957. We have item 2.3, public employee performance evaluation under Government Section 54957. Do we have any public comments regarding closed session items? Okay, we'll wait a moment. We're just checking to see if we have any emails that have come in for public comments for closed session items. How's everybody doing? Oh,
Yeah.
No, that even makes it feel more pressure.
No, there is no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn to closed session, please?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval.
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano.
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, we'll see everybody afterwards. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. I'd like to reconvene the session back at 6 p.m. During the closed session, the board appointed Tina Ramos as assistant principal for John Gutierrez Middle School effective July 1st, 2022. The vote was 3-0. Would you like to come up and say something, introduce yourself, if you're okay? Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Hi. Once again, I'm Tina Ramos, and I'm really excited to be a part of the district. I have heard nothing but absolutely positive things, and meeting with cabinet this past week was a true treat, and I tell everyone I see that I felt so welcomed and appreciated, and you guys didn't even know me yet, and I can't wait to get started on this journey with Anthony, and I think we're going to have a really great year, so thank you once again.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and welcome to the Santa Rita family. So we're excited about, yeah. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Welcome aboard. Thank you. Come aboard.
Not sure if any of the board members would like to say anything.
Only, is it Salinas City you were at? I hear they're losing somebody really good. So welcome to our district. And we're going to be working with you, so.
Yep, I'm excited to have you, and John G's a very special site. We're excited to have you there.
Okay, thank you. And you're welcome to stay. If not, you're totally okay to leave as well. Yeah, yeah, no worries. Yeah, it was the last day, so yeah. So enjoy your break. Thank you for coming. I know. Okay, so we're going to move on to 5.1, approval of the consent agenda for 5.2 to 5.4. If I can please get a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving on to 6.1, Santa Rita Teachers Association. Is anybody here? Nope. Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody here from CSEA? Perfect. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rhonda Velez. I'm with CSEA, the classified union. I don't have a script tonight, so I'm
No,
off,
it's okay.
off the cuff. Let's see. I am our district's only union steward, trying to get people interested in completing that training. I'm working in Summer Academy. Right now I'm stationed as the health aide at JG, loving it. Knock on wood, there's not a lot of injuries, but still there's some kids with some health issues, and I try to check in with a couple of them. So yeah, thank you. Love my Santa Rita family. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you for speaking, and also thank you for doing summer school. We really appreciate it. And for stepping up to those leadership roles. I know those are always tough to get somebody to do that as well.
Thank you, Rhonda. We go back a long time, lady. So, good job.
So moving on to the superintendent's cabinet, we're going to start off with Director of Nutritional Services, Mr. Chuck Helm.
Hi, good evening. So everybody knows Summer Academy started Monday. We did have a couple minor issues on the first day, mostly regarding our POS system. So when the school year ends, it didn't roll over into summer school. So even though the program's the same, there was a few minor things that need to be taken care of. So we got those taken care of. Late Monday morning and Tuesday was just fine. Along with that, that means the menus are now online, just like they were in the regular school year. So parents can go on, look at allergens, look at what we're serving, etc. I know I've been saying it for a couple meetings, but vendor quotes, finally got them. Mostly of what I needed. So didn't get them in time for this meeting, but I do look forward to putting them on for the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? No? Okay, thank you for your update. Chief Business Officer, Ms. Rosa Zamudio.
I've been working on the budget. I have a presentation for you tonight, so I'll just save my comments for that time.
Okay, thank you. Director of Special Education and Student Services, Ms. Melanie Grundy.
Perfect. Yeah, this week, like Chuck had mentioned, summer school. So just getting that off the ground and really focused on extended school year from the special ed side of the house and making sure we're well staffed, that we have occupational therapy and speech services going, and everything kind of just running like a well-oiled machine. So that's been good. And we're on day 3. Planning. So we've had some good in the last couple weeks, some good amount of time to do some planning for the 2022-23 school year. So it's been really nice to just carve out a couple hours and be planning for professional development for our new teachers and our administrators. And today I was able to collaborate with Summer and really just think through counselors and just all the professional development you want to provide next year and what that scope and sequence of training looks like. Just really working on finalizing student placements and final rosters for our special ed classrooms. So been looking at that, holding any last minute IEP meetings we need to with MCOE and just making sure everyone comes in at the beginning of the school year properly placed. And then just really partnering with HR and hiring and just making sure all of our spots are filled and we've done our due diligence. So that's been really a big push, and just grateful to HR for all their support and just perseverance with it. So that's it. Any questions?
No? Okay, thank you for the update.
Absolutely.
Moving on to Director of Parent, Family, and Community Engagement, Dr. Summer Prather-Smith.
Zoned out for a second. I was like, wait, that's me. Hello, everybody. Sorry I wasn't here at the last board meeting. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk quickly about our retreat that I didn't get to share with you. I'm not sure, did those pictures make it over there? No? It's okay. No, maybe not. It's okay. So I had a slideshow, but it kept crashing. So I'm not sure if it's going to make it over there or not. I can send it out and share as well. So we had an amazing retreat with our students. It was unbelievably beautiful heading up to the Sierras. We saw snow, several of our kids' first time they've seen snow or got to have snow, and then got up to the location where there was not snow, thank goodness, because we were not prepared for that, and met up with our groups there and got to spend the whole weekend really working collaboratively with other organizations that were there as well. Our students got to participate in social justice workshops, so they did a mock trial. One of our students was the lead judge in that trial. One of our students was the attorney, and then we had 2 jurors represented on that trial. So it was really nice to see the students get to implement some of the skills they had learned earlier through other sessions. And then they were able to do a really interesting project where they were provided with an iPad and they got to go out into nature and take picture and video and then create a movie that represented something that was important to them. The movie is hilarious, so hopefully I'm waiting for them to send it to me, that our kids did. And then just lots of opportunities to interact in nature with other students and share thoughts and ideas. And so, I think that maybe it's gonna go up. You should be able just to click slideshow at the top. And then we had I think it's on yeah, there we go. So these are just kind of a little bit of what we did. We also got to stop at Sac State and do a quick tour of Sac State. You couldn't pass up an opportunity to see a university. So went through there as well. And then in the end, the kids on our way back, it was a long drive there and back. I got a lot of opportunities just to speak with them about kind of their feelings around the last year and a lot of what they've been facing at their site. Some great ideas from them, how to address some issues. We have some amazing leaders in that group. And so I'm excited for what this next year has to bring in working with those students as well. So it's okay. It's probably going to take forever to load. I'll share it out publicly as well, the slideshow. But it was a great time. We had one boy with us and all the rest were girls. And so he was kind of off in his own cabin with the boys that whole time. But for him, it was really meaningful. He talked about at the end that, you know, the bonds that he was able to make with some of the Black male mentors were really formative for him. And this was a student who was making some decisions for himself. And so definitely a meaningful retreat. They've invited us to come back whenever we want, so we're hoping to join them again next year as well. Oh, there's the snow, so it's kind of going for you a little bit. While that plays and you watch that, I'll share my next part so that I don't get dinged for my time. Along with that, as you know, I shared last time that we started a book club. We have over 23 members signed up at this time, not including all of our administrative staff. I finished the book this weekend. It's really, I have a copy for each of you. It's a great read because they're small essays, 2 to 3 pages written by lots of different authors. And this poor team, I've already come back with like, I just have to tell you one more thing, and ideas that we can use and apply within the classroom. And the real benefit of this text for those who are involved in the book club, as well as later on, is that at the end of each of those essays, there's a principle that's a focus, a strategy, and then something that you can put into action tomorrow. And so it's not just the content, but the application. So I have a book for each of the board members as well. And our goal is to make sure that we're using and bringing that text back throughout the year, and we've embedded it in our principal PDs, which goes along with, I want to invite you, we've, as you know, started for next year, we'll be implementing, well, starting June now, the planning period, an Equity and Inclusion Coalition. We're a little bit jealous because we saw Salinas Union's titles and they get to be the Jedi, which is the Justice and Equity something division, but they're the Jedis. We're like, dang it, we want to be the Jedis. But so the Equity and Inclusion Coalition, and part of that is right now we're working to continue to build with our community partners. We have quite a few really amazing organizations who are going to be joining us. And our goal will be to meet and discuss equity and inclusion within our district, but also to get out onto our sites. And our union partners are going to be part of that with us as well. And so during this coalition, we're going to pick an idea or a principle we're looking at, and then really be present on our sites to get feedback, not just from ourselves internally, but provide an opportunity for our partners to be part of that and then debrief that. So we would like a board member to be a representative on that committee as well. This is our current proposed schedule. It's draft. I think I just printed, I don't remember how many I printed. You'll notice that there's an opportunity for an afternoon meeting, which is where we would kind of plan, debrief, discuss, and then propose site visit times. And those site visits, again, would be arranged with the administration. And kind of the depth and scope of that will grow as the school starts to feel comfortable with us being on the campus, right, as well. So if you're interested, please let me know, and we'll make sure that you're part of that. And I shared already in our previous email the representatives that'll be there. And I'm really excited about the partnership with our high school district, because that's really going to feed in that continuity across our districts. So thank you. That video will continue to play. You can stop it whenever. Thank you, guys. There's a lot of video there. But this is our mock trial. This is our attorneys at law. So I'll make sure that I share it out as well on our Facebook page, so anybody can access the slideshow. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for being brave and going with the students out there. I volunteered for retreats with students and stuff, so it's a lot of work. Yeah. So
it was the 3 a.m. giggle fest that I was like, ladies, please, like I need 2 hours. Like if you can let me sleep 2 hours, I'll be full bore the next day. But
yeah. So thank you, and I'm very appreciative that the students were able to go out there as well. I'd like to volunteer to be on that board. So just I'll put the dates on my calendar and stuff. So thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
No, only that I started reading the book, and oh boy, it is really good. And I really like the fact that it has those 3 tasks at the end, and that you can apply immediately, and reflection. There's a lot of reflection in there too. So I totally think it's a great book to read. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and then Alvin and myself already bought a book. So in case you want to give it to a different staff member, you kind of utilize it as well.
You can say that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Donna Coney.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very excited to share with everybody. Our team's been working hard that we have secured the active response training with our active crisis training for our district. with Mike Kimball and his company, Kimball and Associates, and he's the company that's been working with the other sister districts. And working with Mike, he's been great in the last 24 hours getting us proposals. So that's been wonderful. He will provide our district full training August 1st and 2nd before school starts for active response training to any active shooter situations. He'll also be providing in July our leadership teams and site leadership teams, what are the rules and responsibilities that we need to, and scenarios that we need to understand and kind of play through in our minds, and action plans, right, for when there's an active crisis occurring and what those look like. So we're really happy about that. And later this evening, we'll be discussing the draft LCAP. So I will leave those minutes for that. And summer school is rolling, as everybody else has stated.
No, thank you for bringing that forward. And I think it's good to kind of keep that ongoing. I know we had something happen recently and there's always that reactionary, but I think it's important just to kind of keep steady with that. So hopefully our district can keep doing that.
That's his plan as
Fine.
well.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
I was just going to add real quick that the other benefit of this from the parent family engagement piece is that we will continue to engage our families as well and provide trainings for families so they're in line with what's happening with our schools throughout the year, so that we can tie together and families feel confident with what we're doing in our schools and also have those skills outside of our school setting, because we know that crisis can occur anywhere. So thank you, Donna, for including families.
And some of the things his team does, such as the families, is also the what to do in case for a bus driver, office staff, nutrition, the various scenarios. And so he has those types of trainings as well. So being a part of the big picture and understanding all the little small components that can happen, it's a relationship with his company that we'll be building for all our educational partners.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Thank you. Assistant Superintendent of Human Resource, Ms. Becky Moore.
Thank you. I'm happy to report that our certificated hiring is winding down. We're down to our last handful of positions, if that. So I'm really excited, knock on wood, that that stays the same. And then we are now starting to shift our focus to our classified hiring to make sure that all of those positions are also filled and ready for the new school year. And then last week we met for negotiations with CSEA, and we have another meeting scheduled now for next week. So we're continuing to collaborate on language, and we'll be starting to talk about some of the other negotiation points, I hope, next week. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? No, just appreciate the ongoing relationships we have with our union. So thank you. Okay, moving on to the board and superintendent. First start off with Mr. Andrew Sandoval.
Well, thank you. Share something a little personal. My kids were begging me and my wife to not attend summer school. And they just want to have a great summer break, and, you know, asked if we would ever not let them go to summer school. And of course we said no. They have to go to summer school, and summer school started and they're loving it. So, you know, they're so excited. They're excited to be able to visit with friends who they were able to see the last summer school from the other school site. So they're just so excited. I'm so caught off guard because, you know, 4 days ago they were complaining about it. Now they love it. So I think, you know, kudos to everybody who's involved in that. So great.
Okay, Ms. Alvariano.
I have nothing to report. I just have to ask about the book club dates. Okay, I think of the flyer. So when is, I just need to know the first one. Okay, I think I have it at home, but I just, okay. I'm looking forward to that.
For myself, I just I've talked to a couple of teachers, so I always appreciate the feedback I get from staff. I'm always willing to have a conversation, you know, and just try to, you know, keep improving our district as a Santa Rita family. So that's all I have to report. Ms. Alderman.
Oh, just cranking up planning for next year. So you kind of end one school year and you're stepping right into the next one. I want to give this team a shout out. The amount of time and quick energy put into getting our plans in place for our teacher PD, our new teacher orientation days, as well as a comprehensive professional development series for our site and district leadership team this year. Getting all of that laid out took, just getting over being tired because the week before we'd had our last day of school and just moving straight into that planning. And so this team's all in on getting those things done, hopefully so that people can relax when they do have their days off in the next couple of weeks. That was why we put in all that effort. I'm not calling anyone out for working too much, but so it's been really exciting and getting those things laid out and everyone's quick thinking and actions when needed.
Okay. Thank you for the update and thank you for stressing to our directors to please take care of yourselves as the school year starts. So it's important. Yeah. Any board or questions from the board? No? Okay. Thank you for the update. Moving on to public comment. Do we have any public comment on non-agenda items, either from anybody in person or online or email?
There are none online.
Okay. Any public comment on any agenda items?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8.1, public hearing regarding the district's proposed budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal school year.
Good evening. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the July 1st budget. Just be patient with me. I am presenting two budgets at the same time. We are doing the last budget for the year, but I'm focusing more on the July 1st budget. So this is the public hearing. The budget was already for public inspection on June 2nd in our district website and as well available here at the district office. So I'm going to see if we can, oh, okay. Thank you. So I'm gonna try it and see if I can move to the second slide. Okay, let me try it again. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the highlights for the May revised proposed budget, and just to highlight that this was just a proposed budget. The state haven't signed the budget. They usually do it towards the end of June, but not later than July 1st. After they sign the budget, we have to look on what the actual budget it is and see if we have to do a 45-day budget revision. So for now, we're just doing with, we're budgeting based on estimated numbers and based on the May revised budget. Just a reminder that the budget is a living item and it's moving and changing constantly. And also, as you know, a lot of the things that impact the budget right now is due to the one-time funds that are available next year, but they're not going to be available the following year or the second year out. I do have some items there for you to read. I know I've been talking about this for the last meeting, so I'm not going to go ahead and read it, but it's there just for informational purpose. And I'll talk about it as I go with the slides. So this is pretty much, like I said, the budget assumptions based on the May revise. I think one of the highlights here is the COLA for next year, which is a 6.56%, and it's historical. I don't think we ever got a COLA this high. So I know you probably heard that it's good, right? But just to keep in mind that even though the COLA might seem high, eventually it's not enough for the increases that we have. We have increases in step and column. We have increases, as you can see on the table, for STIRS and PERS. Also, our ADA to enrollment ratio has been decreased due to COVID-19. It used to be in the 90s. This year was on 79% of attendance. So all of that impacts our funding as well. And I'll go more in detail on the next slide once you see the numbers. So this is just a slide so you can see the COLA for current year of 5%, then we're going up, and then we're going back down to a 5% to the following year. And this is just kind of like an example of, yes, we're getting the 6% COLA. These are the increases on CalSTRS, CalPERS, step and columns, usually a 2%. Right now, we just settled with certificated for a 5%. We still have to, we're still in negotiations with our classified unit. So it's blank there because we still in negotiations, but that's gonna be another increase. Also something that is really hurting not only this district, but statewide is the increases on special ed. Just the number of students that are coming in every year has been increasing, so the cost is been increasing as well. And also other increases because of inflation. A lot of things are more expensive, so this is something that we have to keep in mind. And also just keeping in mind that inflation right now, it's about 8%. We're only getting a 6% COLA. So even though it seems like we're getting a lot in the history, it's really not enough to all the expenses that we have and the increases that we have going on.
I had a question on that slide.
Yes.
I know you have the percentages, but the COLA, that's based off of the percentage of the ADA, right? As far as how much additional funds we'll be getting as a percentage of.
I'll go over on the next slide. Yeah, it's about $1 million compared to last year. So I'm gonna go ahead. I usually just take the last budget with the new budget and then go over the differences. So I'm gonna go over the most significant changes. As you can see, the LCFF funding based on the last budget, the estimated actuals is my last budget for the year. It stays about the same. There is a decrease on federal revenue and state revenue. This is due to the one-time funds. It doesn't mean that we're not getting the money. It just means that we had budgeted expenses this year, hoping that we can get people to work those extra hours and providing those services. However, as you know, we were having a hard time getting staff and shortage and things like that. So as we reduce our expenses in the bottom line, we also have to reduce our revenue because these are one-time funds that are based on reimbursement. So if we don't spend it, we don't get to recognize it as a revenue until we spend it. So it doesn't really mean that we're losing the money. We're just moving that money to the following year. So on the revenue, that's the main reason why revenue was a decrease of $1.6 million. And then as you can see, we also decreased our books and supplies and our capital outlay. You see an increase on certificated and classified salaries. This is because we budgeted that one-time payment for $2,000 for employees. It is already budgeted and it's also reflected on the benefits as well. So those are the most significant changes from last budget to this to the last budget of the year. And then I'm gonna go over with the difference between the last budget and the next budget for the following year. So the main reason for as you can see, that was your question on the LCFF funding. What's the difference? So comparing last year's budget and this coming year, we're gonna see an increase of $1.1 million, and this is reflecting the 6% COLA increase. Also, we have a reduction again on state and federal, and this is again due to the one-time funds. I did provide an exhibit with the list of all the grants and the different years, so you can get an idea of the name of the grants. It's just really hard to go over all of them because it's a lot of them.
No, we appreciate, at least I appreciate the list because we're able to kind of see, okay, this is only one
Yes.
time and we're only going to spend it in this year and this 2 years. So for 1 year, it looks like we have a $4 million surplus, and the next year looks like we have a deficit because of the year that it's kind of
Yes,
getting spent.
yes. So that's a really good reference. It listed all the one-time funds, and it does have the years, so you know when is the last year that we're going to spend it, and everything is linked to this budget right here. As you can see, certificated, if I go to the expense side, certificated salaries increased by $1.5 million. This is due to the 5% salary increase that is already reflected there. That's the main reason. Then classified, it only went up just by the step-in column, and then we have increases in our benefits as well as salaries are increasing. And then again, we're reducing our book supplies and other services, mainly to the one-time funds not being available. So as we reduce the one-time funds, we don't have the revenue, we're not gonna do those expenses again. So that's why you see a reduction there. Something to point out, it's the last line on the other auto-go, it's the build back. This is the special ed build back that we get through MCOE. That it's a big increase of $396,000. And every year is just going up. I was just going over with Melissa on the last year's I think the last year went up by $1.5 million. So this is something that really concerns me. Just not getting enough funds from the state for special ed grants, and our expenses are way more to the money that we're receiving.
I had a good question. On the total expenses, that also include the one-time expenses when we're using the funds?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so we're reducing all those one-time expenses as well. And we also had one-time expenses that not necessarily were used for the one-time funds, but we purchased transportation vans. We purchased, the truck, Ford truck for our MOT department, equipment that our MOT department needed. However, it is a one-time expense. It did reflected a savings in our contract services, because before we used to contract out those services with another agency. Now we're able to do it in-house. So it was a one-time expense, but the long term is actually saving us money on the contract services. So all of those one-time expenses that we did, they are reduced on this budget right here, and it's already reflected.
I have a question. You said for the amount we're getting from special ed grants is getting reduced. Is that what you said?
I'm just saying that it's not enough. The money that we're getting is not enough for the expense that we have, because every year the number of special ed students is increasing, and the funds that we get is not enough to cover those expenses and the needs for the students.
Okay, so there's not like we just get a certain amount of funds. It's not like depending on the student and the services that we get reimbursed, nothing like that?
No, we get a grant from the state, and then from there we use that grant to use it for students here, and then we get a bill from MCOE for the students that they're serving. This year we got a one-time funds for special ed, but it's still not enough, because our expenses for special ed together here with the district and the bill back is way more than it's. For example, compared to last year, it was $1.5 million more that we are getting. So because we don't have the funds, usually what we do is we do a contribution out of the unrestricted fund to the restricted fund. And that's a contribution to the general fund.
So it
I
sounds
hope
like
that
the
makes
challenge
sense.
is the way the state funds it is not based off of what the need is in the district, but rather
Correct.
like here, there's a block grant, make it work, and then if you don't, you have to take it out of your other funds.
Unrestricted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is not only Santa Rita, it's all over the state, and it's a concern for special ed all over the state. You can hear it with other districts. You can ask other managers, they're going to tell you the same. And then the other big change is the transfer out that we don't have. This was the $1.5 million that we transferred to the Gavilan View Project Kitchen to Fund 35, and $150,000 to Fund 40 for the La Jolla portables. And as you can see, we don't have that on the next year. It was a one-time project. So this is just projecting a multi-year projection. I have to say that it looks better than the one I did on the second interim. The main reason is because right now I'm using the state waiver on how the district's getting funded through the LCFF, and I'm using the prior year the 3-year prior year ADA average, which is what it's most likely gonna happen. There's different proposals, but based on what I've been hearing, most of the districts are budgeting on this, and the county is also recommending to do this, and that's why it looks better than what I had presented back in March. So as you can see, this year, the main reason for a deficit is really for that one-time payment that we're doing for our employees. And if you remember, we did that board resolution with the ending fund balance, and we assigned about $1 million just for that. So when we do that, that's money that it's at the end of the fund balance, so it's taking it from the bottom. So when we do that, it's always going to look like we're deficit spending, because it's really grabbing the money from that line. It's just the way that the forms and the way that we do it, it's going to look on the reds, because we're pretty much grabbing that money from our reserves.
Yeah, what I've learned in the couple of years I've been on the school board, as far as the challenging, the way, it's not on you, it's just the way the county is as far as presenting the information, because you could have a 1 year where it looks like you have $4 million, you receive the $4 million, but you can't spend them that year, you have to spend them next year, And so the next year you'll have deficit spending, even though the year before you're kind of going and stuff. So I think it's always challenging to kind of help people see that one year you have a deficit spending only because you're spending the money you got last year, but you're spending it this
That's
year.
right.
Yeah, and then
Yes.
part of these projections kind of also depend on our attendance to enrollment, right?
Yes.
Because of COVID, it's been relatively really low,
Yes.
and then I'll kind of see how our ADA and our numbers come up the next kind of year after COVID and stuff, because that could also change the 2024 and the 2025.
That's correct. Thank you. Yes, that's correct. So our LCFF funding is about 80% of our total revenue. So yeah, our enrollment and ADA and the COLA is a big impact on how we do our projections. And as you can see right now, not only our district, but most of the districts, unless you're basic aid, depends on state funding. So it depends how they want to fund us. That's how our numbers are going to look like. That's why the last budget looked worse. Now that I'm using the waiver for the 3-year average waiver, now it looks better. So yeah, we depend a lot on state aid funds for that. So this is something that I shared with you during the last meeting. It's pretty much aligning our unrestricted ending fund balance. The ones that says general fund committed, those are part of the board resolution that we did during the last meeting. As you know, the state is now requiring a 10% to have no more than 10% on reserves, but doesn't mean that you cannot have more than 10%. What it means is that if you can have more than 10%, you just have to have a board resolution with the committed funds. And that's what we did last board meeting. So we are in compliance, and this is just a breakdown of what was on that last board resolution. And then anything else that was left over, it was assigned to increases on special ed, increases of ongoing expenditures, and compensated absences. This is pretty much vacation. If an employee want to quit, that's our liability that we set aside. This is our ASB fund. It's not a lot of changes here, but I'm doing the last budget or current budget and next year budget. Just slightly changes. Something that I want to share about our ASB fund is that in the past years, and usually all of the districts, what they usually do with this fund, they keep it separately from our financial system. We've been using QuickBooks in the last year. So right now we're working with Monterey County Office of Education to move those numbers and those finances to our system that we use in SCAPE. And this is not just Santa Rita, all of the districts work that way. It's just for more transparency purposes and being able to have the same approvals that we have in the system. So we've been working on that. We're hoping by the next year, July 1st, we can move everything over there to SCAPE. And like I said, this is something new. Before, I don't know if you remember, but we were not even required to provide this information. Now we are required, but we're making sure that we're bringing everything aligned in the same system. So we've been working on that in the last weeks as well. We're doing an internal audit to make sure that everything gets transferred to the system that we currently have.
So this ASP fund is pretty much what the school sites have been fundraising or raising.
Yes, those are the fundraisers, and the reason why we still have QuickBooks is whenever they needed a check, we can print out the check in-house. So it's easier. However, now with the new requirement, we found a little bit of an inconsistency. So we want to make sure that we have check and balances and everything just the same way that we do with other funds. It's just going to be easier. It's going to be more transparent, and there's going to be less room for errors as well.
Okay, thank you.
And this is our preschool fund. As you can see, it's pretty much stable. Comparing to the last budget to next budget, we are seeing a slightly increase. We still don't have that contract, so it's just an estimate based on our current contract that we have right now. The increases on salaries and benefits is just for the step-in column for next year. And then you see a reduction in books and supplies and other services just to be able to balance that budget. So as salaries and benefits increase, we have to make a reduction so it can be balanced. We had a lot of one-time purchases this year. So some of those reductions are items that we're not going to need this year because we already purchased them this year. We're not going to need them next year because we already purchased them this year. It's hard when you're working with 4 budgets at the same time. You don't even know what year you're in. So, but everything else is pretty much staying the same. Just that's just the only big change. For cafeteria fund, pretty much the same on the revenue side. We did decrease our salaries and benefits due to we had a lot of extra hourly and overtime due to COVID. So we're not anticipating to have that much on the following year. And that's why you see a reduction there. We did increase our books and supplies because just the cost of everything is going up. So, and now with the new requirement for universal meals, which we already doing it because we are a district that provides meal to all the students regardless of the qualification. We're hoping to see more participation now that it's a state mandate for all the districts in California. And the Fund 14, this is for the 5-year plan. It was board approved. It's pretty much staying the same. The only project that we have here is the rekeying of the district. And I know they were hoping to do it in the winter and then they got behind. So they moved it to the summer. It looks like it's gonna happen between June and July. So once I do my next budget revision, we'll know exactly how much we're gonna spend on each year. For right now, we just roll over the budget. So they can have enough funds to finish that project, whether it's going to be this year or the beginning of July. And this is our Fund 25. This is where we get revenue for or any construction projects in the area, and we use it to pay for. Right now, we're using it to pay for legal fees for WASP and anything that goes back related to facilities. This is the Fund 35. So we did reduce the expenses for the GV kitchen project. We did left some money there for the following year for equipment. As our director mentioned, that some of the equipment that they order is gonna get delayed until late, maybe July or August. So we did move some funds to the next year so we can have enough funds to pay for that equipment. And we're hoping to purchase the Soberana land, hopefully. So we had some money reserved there as well. And for Fund 40, we don't have a lot of activity there for the July 1st. This was the project for the La Jolla portables. So we did have that this closing year, and we're not having that next year. So there's no activity on that fund for now. And these are the forms. You're pretty familiar with the forms. They're there for your review. I don't want to go over it. It's a lot of pages. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any of your questions you might have.
Does the board have any questions or comments? No? No, I think you answered all my questions, and I appreciate the way all the extra information you present. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. That's only informational, so we're going to move on to 8.2. Another informational item, voter survey update 2022 bond feasibility study. I think we have somebody online.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Lucia Del Pupo. I'm with FM3 Research. I'm going to go ahead and walk through some of the preliminary results of the poll. Before I do so, Miguel, did you want to add anything from your firm before I jump into the results, or should I go?
No, please take us through, Lucia. Just briefly, good evening, board members, staff. Just to connect the dots here for you, you may recall at the last board meeting, we had discussed potential creation of a funding program through a school facilities improvement program. And that was essentially a bond for the November election. And so here, I think Lucia says, hey, you know what, let's check with the community to see if this is a good time. And so here what we have is a preliminary survey results here. Okay, Lucia, please.
Great, thank you, Miguel. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So yeah, these are preliminary findings. The survey is still ongoing. It started on June 3rd. We're targeting reaching between 300 and 400 voters, and it's a random sample survey. But in the meantime, the data I have here is kind of some key findings from the interviews we've conducted thus far among 155 of the voters in the district. These interviews have been conducted online and via phone, and in English and in Spanish. And the margin of error, something that I'm going to refer to a few times and is helpful to keep in mind on this data, is about 7.9%. As we get more interviews, and my colleague will present the final data in a few weeks, we'll have a bigger sample, which leads to a smaller margin of error and greater certainty. But for this data, that 7.9 number is pretty important. So I'll go ahead and dive in. So some of the key questions we asked. So early on in the survey, we asked about the perceived favorability of various local institutions related to education in the district. And we really saw that a majority of voters saw teachers, the school district, their local schools really positively. A lot of positive sentiment here in this community about local schools, 68% favorable, 59% towards the district, 56% towards their local elementary school, and 53% towards a high school. The board does not receive majority support favorability, but it's still a net positive, basically by more than 2 to 1. And this isn't uncommon.
Sorry, can you stop? Sorry to stop you really quick. I can't really see too well. Can you just briefly explain the different colors? I can't, even with my glasses, I can't see that.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
To the left column, that 39% would be what category?
That's the very favorable. So that 39% is very favorable, then the 29% is somewhat favorable, 7% is somewhat unfavorable. The darker orange is the very unfavorable. And then the two gray bars together kind of make up the I heard of and I don't know or I've never heard of. And then on the right there's two columns there. There's one that says total favorable, and that summarizes basically whoever said very or somewhat, and total unfavorable is whoever said very or somewhat unfavorable. Yeah, and so just picking up where I left off, basically, people have broadly favorable views of the institutions, including the board. The difference with the board, and this is not uncommon, is that there's more people who are unable to express an opinion. You have more than 1/3 who don't have an opinion on the board. And that's not uncommon for people to know more about teachers than they do maybe about the school board itself. And please don't hesitate as I go through. If you have any kind of clarifying questions like that, I'm happy to pause. So another question we asked was about the quality of education in the district. And we did see that more than half of voters rate the quality of education as good or excellent. So 59% said excellent or good. But as you see in that dark blue bar, only 14% said it was excellent. So overall, it's kind of a positive feeling, but a soft positive. It's not super intense. But that said, you only have 19% who have negative feeling, who are saying it's not so good or poor, and 22% saying they're unable to express an opinion. So generally satisfied with the quality of education, but not intensely feeling that. And then in terms of perceived need for funding, so we asked folks if they felt there was a great need for additional funding, some need, a little need, or no real need for additional funding. And we saw 2/3 saying there was a great need or some need for funding. Only 15% said there was a little need or no need. And then 17% who were unable to express an opinion. And this question is really helpful because even though we do ask about direct support for a bond measure, and we ask about some of the different kind of potential spending areas that I'll get to in a few slides, having this question, seeing it align with the bond measure support tells you that people kind of have trust in the district and are comfortable with the process. Sometimes we see in some communities where there's some distrust, a gap between the perceived need and the willingness to support a bond measure, but I'm happy to report that we don't really see that gap in this community. So getting into the measure. So here is the measure language we tested. And it's really important that when we test this measure language, we test it in a way that really emulates the 75-word ballot language that a voter will see when they get their ballot in the mail or they go to their polling place. And the reason for this is that that's the one piece of information that we know that every single voter is going to have when they cast their ballot. And so It's the most important question in the survey, and we ask it quite early on before we don't want to affect their opinion too much by asking other contextual questions. One thing that's really important to note is that at the $32.6 million level, that's above your Prop 39 limit. So this would require 2/3 level of support to succeed on the ballot. Lower levels, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, would only require 55%. So what we did see when we asked folks, we gave them a chance to either, on the phone, hear the ballot language, or if they're reading it online, read the ballot language. We asked them if they would vote yes or no. And then when they said, I'd vote yes, we'd say, was that definitely yes or probably yes? And then for undecided folks, we asked them if they were leaning. And what we saw was that 68% of folks said that they would vote yes for that $32.6 million bond measure. So right at that 2/3 threshold. 31% were opposed and 8% were undecided. This is where I want to bring back to that 7.9% margin of error I flagged earlier. So what this really tells us, when I see that 68%, I say, that's a strong level of support if you were looking at a 55% measure. But for 2/3 measure, it is cutting it a little bit close because you have that 7.9 margin of error. So it could basically be ranging anywhere between 61% and then 76%. It's a kind of a pretty big range. But at the lower level with a smaller bond amount, you would be in really safe territory. Whereas here, it is a little bit of a risk at this level. We did ask an open-ended question. I didn't include that in the slide deck because this data was fresh today. But just for your context, we asked a question asking folks to explain why, in their own words, they would support a measure and why they would oppose it. And the predominant theme for supporting it is just, viewing education as important and viewing it important to continue funding services for children and education in the community. Those opposed, kind of a classic argument we see with bond measures is just, anti-tax sentiment that exists in every community. So one of the questions we asked as a follow-up was whether about the specific property tax impact of a measure. So we tested that $40 tax impact, which correlates to that or $32.6 million bond. We asked the $30 tax impact, which correlates to a $25 million bond, and then $20, which is the next level down, to see, if hearing that tax impact, if a lower tax impact would garner more support, and if isolating that tax impact, would affect support strongly. And what we see is that it actually didn't. Sometimes we see a big drop off when you isolate people, telling them exactly how much they're going to be paying without telling them all the good stuff that they get that goes along with it. But it is notable that, a smaller bond amount does lead to larger support. And particularly, once again, when we're factoring in that margin of error and looking at those thresholds for passage, it does kind of point us in that direction of maybe considering a smaller bond. We did also ask folks a very long list of different ways the money could be used in schools to understand what their priorities are in the community. And here I pulled the list of the top 10 items so far, and things that people view as most important. So again, to give you kind of a summary of how the bars work, because I know this can be a lot of data to read, but the dark blue bar is extremely important. The kind of middle blue is very important. Light blue is somewhat important. Orange is not important. And then the grays were people who just didn't have an opinion on that item. And then on the right there, we totaled whoever said each item was extremely or very important. And what we really saw was fundamental repairs were really important in this district. So repairing leaky roofs, repairing deteriorating roofs and dry rods, replacing aging water pipes, replacing aging electrical wiring. And then obviously, unsurprisingly, in light of the tragedies that we've all witnessed the past few weeks, security and student safety have kind of emerged to the top here as kind of top priorities for your voters. Other items too in this top tier were, providing STEM labs, updating fire alarm sprinkler, qualifying for state matching funds, and repairing aging plumbing. All of those were also things that 2/3 or more of voters said that were an extremely or very important priority for them. So getting into some of the messaging. So one of the things we did in the survey is we do kind of a stress test of saying, okay, you get that initial ballot, as I mentioned earlier, very clean read, information that everyone in the community will get when they vote. And then we test some positive informational statements and see if, learning good things about the bond kind of increases support. And then we also test some criticisms, things that might come up in the community, things that someone might post on Nextdoor or tell their neighbor. And for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to just focus on kind of the positive. I'll show you the top positive convincing items in a moment. But generally, what we see here is a little bit of movement. So we did see after people hear the good things, support moves up to 73%, and it's durable. After they hear some criticisms, the support remains at 73%. But I do want to flag once again, when you factor in that 7.9% margin of error on this data set, it is still pretty close to where we would want to be. Ideally, we'd want to see a little bit higher. So I do think that kind of considering a 55% threshold bond might be a good option. And so just wanted to flag here the kind of top messages in favor of the measure, the top informational statements that really were compelling to folks as reasons that the bond is needed. And the first one, a message that we consider a strong message in our industry is one that 40% or more voters say is very convincing. So 45% thought the idea of, upgrading resources so that students could be achieving their best and, competing in the economy was very convincing. The idea of deferring upgrades and the long-term costs of that was also similarly very convincing. 41% thought an argument on aging infrastructure was highly compelling. And as you'll remember, that was also one of the things that they felt was or aging infrastructure was several of the top priority items for them. And then 40% said, this idea of making sure the funds stay local, this kind of accountability aspect also really resonated quite strongly among voters as a reason that the bond measure is needed. So the key takeaways here, are really that this is a community that views their local schools positively, views the district favorably, and sees the need for funding. They're willing to support a bond measure, but a 2/3 might be a bit of a reach. A 55% level bond would be a safer bet. They really do, they're aware that the facilities are aging, and they really prioritize allocating funds to that, as well as to student safety and security.
Thank you, Lucia. If I can ask one question here, Lucia, something that we discussed is that currently we're at about 50% completion of the total survey. And what kind of trend do we have? Is it improving over time? What can we anticipate, you think, as we complete the remainder of 50% of the survey? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure, Miguel. So, as the survey fills out, I can't predict exactly how it's going to go. But, it has improved as we've kind of filled out the sample and reached more voters as they've gotten more data. And I will say, I just wouldn't expect a lot of change at this point. The more interviews we get incrementally, the impact on the data decreases. So overall, we would expect this trend to kind of stay more or less the same. It might improve a little bit, but I think this is more or less kind of where the final ballpark will end.
Great, thank you.
I had a question, Miguel. I know they were mentioning the two different thresholds, 55 versus 2/3. What's the difference in amount of bonding that we're able to do at the different levels?
Thank you for that question. Correct. At the higher threshold, the 2/3, we were looking at about 32.6 million. At the Prop 39 55% threshold, we're looking at about 25 million in total funding. And so you may recall as part of the last presentation, we looked at the $40 tax rates, that's 2/3. We looked at the $30 tax rate, that's Prop 39, and then also looked at a lower amount at $20 tax rate, which was generating closer to about 20 million or so. And so the Prop 39 level is the more conservative approach, just given that margin of error that Lucia has alluded to. Certainly, I think we hope to close down that margin of error as we get additional responses that would solidify, I think, a better sample overall of the voter community.
So it's about $7 million difference that we'd, by obviously being a little more conservative, less funding we'd be able to get the 25 versus obviously taking the risk and going for the higher number then.
That's correct. That's correct. And so, just to provide some context here, I think what occurred. What is it yesterday? That statewide here as part of the more recent election with COVID, the pandemic, the economy, and in our very much clear sight right now. The election statewide for maybe about 22, I think the last count was, of school bond measures that were out there. There was about a lower 70% success rate. And so the majority of those were Prop 39, recognizing again that 2/3 threshold is a pretty high mark to try and hit. And so at 70% rate of passage, it's just slightly lower than what it's been historically in prior years, where typically it's ranged somewhere in the 80s, even higher 80s, depending on the election cycle. But we think again that it's a pretty strong showing, and given all the factors that were currently being that we're currently facing, again, the pandemic and the economy primarily, that's I think that's remarkable. And so as we talk about a Prop 39 election, thinking about current results, it looks like that there would be some strong support and some favorable showing, especially in light of these survey results currently.
Okay. And if we did, for example, the 25 million, depending on our bonding capacity, is whether we're able to go after the other 7 or whatever amount that is, going with the 55% threshold. Kind of depend on the bonding capacity at that point, right? Because we're also kind of limited based off of the revenue that comes in as well.
That's correct. I think that I don't have the immediate bonding capacity number in front of me, but we did have enough. We had sufficient bonding capacity to be able to sell the first tranche of bonds. You may recall from the last presentation, we talked about how we were going to parcel off the total bond amount in chunks, right? We refer to those chunks as series of bonds. And so the first series of bonds would be sold shortly after the election was approved. And then subsequent to that, there would be maybe about 2 to 3 years until the next series of bonds would be sold. And so what would happen through that course of the time, certainly the district would implement its projects, but there would be additional growth in the district's tax base, and we would repay outstanding debts, which would provide us additional bonding capacity over time.
Can you remind me, Ms. Alderman, as far as what the last conversations were if we were trying to do it? I know we were initially thinking of pushing it back till next year, but
So we had, Sarah brought up concern about running it with this next election, but the vote was to go ahead and do the survey and then get the board's direction on, do we want to pursue getting our documents in order that the board would need in order to pass the resolution to form a bond? Or do we then want to say we're not ready for this November election and we want to wait a year?
okay. And also waiting a year would also kind of put a hold on projects that were kind of
The
needing.
projects that we needed the bond funding specifically for. So we're looking at being able to potentially meet our matching requirement to begin the modernization project at Gavilan View, but the difference would be building a gym at Gavilan View would require the bond funding, right? But the reality is the modernization project has to take place because it frees up the space where the gym would go. So there is a rationale if we needed to wait a year that we could stagger and still get some of the modernization pieces where you're replacing like for like in place on the campuses, and then the bond funded projects would be like phase 2, if you will. So if we potentially held off a year, there's certainly a plan and a path for doing, getting projects started with the modernization piece, and then phase two would be the bond-funded new construction pieces or repairs and things that would be funded by bonds.
And if we decided to go for a bond, were you saying, Miguel? We're going to say something?
Yes, just one key point here, just for clarification. I think as you mentioned, waiting 1 year, a Proposition 39 election, you may recall, has some caveats as to when the district is eligible to go out on the ballot. And so under Proposition 39, a school district can place a measure on the ballot only in consolidation with other regularly scheduled elections, which means in this case that the district would have to wait till the following opportunity, which would be 2024, in order to call a Prop 39 election. Certainly, you would have still at your disposal a Proposition 46 election, which is that 2/3 election, and the district can call that through a special election on any given Tuesday after meeting certain requirements, of course. But again, Prop 39, next opportunity, if you decide to wait, is until 2024.
I mean, we went forward this year with the bond and it got passed. Does our district have the bandwidth to work on those extra projects if we get that bonding? So we'd be doing obviously the modernization stuff, the 1-for-1 plus whatever the projects we get with the.
So what it would allow us to do, particularly with that first selling of the bonds, are those infrastructure pieces that are around safety, leaky roofs, those pieces that, La Jolla still is on a septic tank, and that's not a good thing. And projects like that need to be done in connection with the modernization, laying the infrastructure work and those pieces at especially our two most aging sites. And so there is certainly a benefit, and we definitely, with potential, staff shifts and things like that, have the ability to they'd be phased in each year. Certain parts of the project would be done before we move on to the next part, to have the bandwidth to cover that work.
Okay. And how does it affect as far as like if we go after bond this year, as far as like our staffing and our directors and kind of the workload there as well?
So that was one of our rationales. You'll see later we're proposing a management position in MOT to help carry some of that, the day-to-day operations, because Victor excels at being a project manager and noticing and making sure that things are done to the letter of what we were told they would be done, and pursuing avenues when they haven't been completed as such. And then making sure our maintenance department is fully staffed so that those day-to-day operations and repairs and things like that are still continuing while the projects are being managed will be essential.
Okay. You guys have any questions before I say anything else? Or?
No, just some comments.
You want to?
Well, I'm in favor of moving forward just because cost now versus cost later. I think that, the survey results are telling. I think if we can get buy-in from our teachers, our staff, our community to really get out the votes, I'm more confident in assuring it passes. I think Measure M that the high school district passed with no issues. And I think the community knows that, there's definitely a need. Whether it's at the threshold of 55, I think that might be a good option only because, we can always go bond out later. It's not like if we get the additional funds, we're going to be able to spend that in the next 3 years. So I think that's another reason to go with the lower amount. That's my thought.
Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I kind of hesitate to have it this in November. I don't know. I'm just I understand what you're saying, that cost effective, cost wise, it might be more advantageous to us to have it right away. But I'm still kind of thinking it's too soon. But that's my opinion right now.
So
our survey will be complete for our next board meeting. And so we can see if that has changed anything. So we're getting this preliminary presentation when they're about 50% complete with surveying on the bond sort of tenability for our community. At our next board meeting, it'll be 100%
Good, and that's
complete,
what,
and so that might help.
and that was my next question, was to see when it was all going to be completed, so that way we have a better picture of what the community is thinking.
Yeah, I think for myself, I was feeling the same way as far as I think moving forward with the bond, especially at the 55% threshold. While we wait for the survey results, is there anything else that we can put in place, assuming that's the direction we go? Because I know we have a short timeline for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think if there is, I would like to kind of, I'm not sure if it'll require board approval or what will happen, but I do want to take as many steps forwards because I think I have a feeling that's the direction we're probably going to go.
Miguel, do you want to go ahead and summarize what our next step would be along with getting that 100% survey results?
Sure. So as noted at the next board meeting on June 22nd, we should have 100% survey results. Well before then, at that time, we'll present the survey results in addition to a series of documents that would be available for district board consideration that would initiate the process to compose the school facilities improvement district. That's essentially the bond vehicle that we will be using to modernize our schools. And so that would be the initial step. Okay, and so that if the survey results do support the 2/3 level or the lower threshold at 55%, at that time we will also be making recommendation to the board to go one way or the other. Okay, one thing is that in terms of the overall composition of the funding program, I think here what you have as an initial take, looking at project preferences from the voter community, is that they're all at the 70% level of support. So overwhelmingly, I think you see that there is some good alignment with the district's needs, with what the community perceives as being those needs, or at least preferences. So that's a very positive sign. So I think what I mentioned that because it is also going to be part of sort of the overall composition of the bond program that we're going to present to you at the next board meeting. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of where I'm kind of feeling is, I mean, if we have a high approval rating, the funding is definitely needed, and especially if we would have to wait 2 years. I mean, we do next year, but it would be the higher threshold, you know, and as long as we have the bandwidth to get it done, then I think it'd be a good idea to move forward. So we look forward to the next board meeting to have that forward.
I did have 2 more questions.
Sure.
What's the deadline for submission for the bond to make sure we're on the election? That's question number 1. And then question number 2, is there a downside or what would be the cost? You know, let's just say, you know, we don't get the bond approved. Is there a downside to, because we can attempt it again in 2 years, right?
Yes. The first question that,
yeah.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
To put it on the ballot this year.
No, I think that's the greatest downside, as you mentioned, is the increase in costs. Okay, the longer you wait to fund your facilities, I think that, you know, what you're going to find is that there's going to be some escalation. That's the stuff that we all know. There's obviously the unknowns, right? Where the economy is, where interest rates are for borrowing, and that aspect of it. Somewhat correspondingly to is that, you know, you continue to defer being able to get in line to get the state aid grants from the school facilities funding program. And so you may recall that was a huge impetus, I think, in us exploring the bond program, you know, only as sort of a vehicle that would allow the district to leverage its fair share of dollars from Sacramento. And so that's another thing that we're mindful about. So but I think, you know, in a nutshell, I would see those as being the larger, sort of the greater downside. In terms of the deadline to call the election, for Proposition 39 to get on the November ballot, our drop dead deadline is August 12th. But I mentioned there are some additional requirements onto the school district to set up the school facilities. The school facilities improvement district. And so for that reason, there are going to be some additional actions at the at this next board meeting and at the subsequent one, well before the August 12th date comes along. Okay.
I think, Gathering View has waited a long time for the gym and the improvements. And of course, La Jolla is in need of some outlets and things like that, right? So I think, I'm in big support of that. So.
Yeah, so whatever we can do to hopefully have on that trajectory where we can hopefully the rest of the board supports it, we can move forward with that. So. Any other questions?
Thanks, Miguel.
Okay. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you,
Great. Thank you,
Lucia.
folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 9.1, approval of revised job description for maintenance and operations supervisor.
So we have reviewed the job description for this position. It has been a vacant position for 3 or 4 years, I believe. But in analyzing the needs, as you see, we are going to be requesting an FTE for this position. And so we did review the job description and made a few revisions just to bring it current with today's needs.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Can I get a
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, item 9.2, approval of new one full-time employee supervisor of maintenance and operations.
Thank you. So as I just mentioned, an analysis of the workload, particularly in identifying the projects that we have been reviewing with the facilities committee, have indicated a need to fill this position.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, moving on to student services. Item 10.1 is approval of Stepping Stone Group contract.
Perfect. So this is a contract we've had this school year, but it's adding an additional SLP, a speech therapist. So it's a total of 3 SLPs that would be utilized district-wide, as well as a behavior technician, so a paraprofessional with behavior expertise.
Okay, so this would be for the following.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, item 10.2, approval of Boca Grande contract.
Perfect. So again, this is for next school year. This is for a virtual SLP. She's been over at La Jolla and has actually been flying out to do in-person assessments. So it's been a fantastic working relationship. So we're hoping to continue with that for next year.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you. 10.3, approval of Goodfellow therapy contract for ESY.
Perfect. So it's a contract you saw at the last meeting, but that was for next school year. This is for extended school year for summer school for our SPED students, and it's occupational therapy as well as speech. So it's both those services.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. 10.4, approval of Maxim Healthcare contract for CODA.
Perfect. So this is a continued contract. We've actually had this CODA for 4 years, so she's going to continue with us. It's a certified occupational therapist, so she works very closely with our OTs. And
Okay.
it's again for next school year.
Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Ms. Alvariano,
Aye.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 12.1, public hearing regarding the district's 2022-2023 LCAP draft. So at this time, do I need to open up the hearing? Or is it just an informational item?
You open a public hearing.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing at 7:19.
Donna has some.
So thank you. We have the draft LCAP that was attached in our board docs tonight. And in that draft, I have a small presentation for you with a couple updates to for your discussion. So LCAP, just a little brief overview. What is it? It's built around the state priorities, access to core basic services, implementing Common Core standards, parent involvement, student achievement, student engagement, school climate, access to broad course of study, and other student outcomes. Local indicators are part of the accountability system of our LCAP. How is it measured? Two different ways, actually. State indicators, the quantitative data. These would be our state assessments, such as our SBAC, LPAC data, suspension rates, benchmarks, other surveys and attendance rates. And then our local indicators, also qualitative data, just that access. So all of our students have the Chromebooks, access to music, PE, the Parent Resource Center, and also giving out those Chromebooks to those families at the elementary school is another excellent way we can show implementation. How do our one-time grants affect? We kind of discussed this back in February, March. They actually support the goals and actions of our LCAP. They provide the extra funding for the safe in-person learning. Some of the grants increase funding for our social emotional needs, supports for our unduplicated counts, ELs, and students experiencing homelessness, foster youth, and our special needs students and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. They increase engagement opportunities for students with attendance concerns, increase professional development, and opportunities for all staff. And we'll go over those a little bit here. Similar graph that we did when we gave you the update in February or March. We have the ESSER grant that is through September of 2024. Estimated actuals at the end of May was about 1.1 million. Estimated actuals for the ELO Opportunities Grant, and that is a 2-year plan. We're at about 677,000 out of the 2.4 million. And that's where we have the STEM program coming out of. Some of our a lot of our summer school is being spent. So this number is changing every minute. So some of the actions that have happened with this. Educator Effectiveness Grant we received at about Christmas time is when the board adopted the grant there. We've spent about 104,000 for that. And again, that is about a 5-year grant. So we've got some time on that one, and hopefully, and that'll help with our professional development and restorative practices and school climate equity conferences that we have attended. LCAP goal, currently we have 3 LCAP goals. All students will have access to rigorous instruction provided by highly qualified teachers and supported by highly effective leadership with appropriate resources. Goal 2, all students will achieve academic proficiency through appropriate classroom placement, including strategic groupings for effective classroom-based interventions to support full access to the Common Core state standards, rigorous instruction, and social-emotional supports. And goal 3 is to significantly increase parent and community engagement to inspire them to be actively involved in preparing their students to be college and career ready and to reduce chronic absenteeism. And now some of the funding last year was for our LCAP was adjusted based on our one-time grants. So it's interesting how the actuals, estimated actuals have come through, and also some of our feedback. So feedback, as you have heard in some of our board meetings, as well as throughout the year from our educational partners, we've had a lot of feedback. And in that feedback, we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we put this in the LCAP? I'm like, well, it doesn't really fit here, but it kind of fits there, and it's not transparent. So we'd like to propose to show transparency of a shared value and importance to add a goal for. This will ensure that SRUSD is cultivating a safe, inclusive, restorative environment within all schools and classrooms with a focus on equity, anti-racism, and anti-bias at the core of whole child support. It would have 3 action items: implementing anti-bias equity, anti-racism policies and practices by building school leaders and staff capacity. It would implement restorative justice practices. We've been starting those with some of our one-time grants and seeing the successes of the restorative practices and making that sustainable going forward. Create a positive learning community through the provision of mental health support and trauma-informed practices. Some of these we have in Goal 1, Goal Action 3, or Goal 2, Action 4, but they're just actions within. Putting them together in a wholesome goal and adjusting the actions really will show a more fluid transparency to our educational partners. So with our great business department, our LCAP this year, it's based on the number of students that create the unduplicated count. So from the increase of our unduplicated count from years prior, we are up to 2,616 students that qualify for the unduplicated count that are free reduced meals, English learners, our students experiencing homelessness, and our foster students. Our current LCAP that we'll be going forward with is at $9.4 million. And that has gone up from the 2021 LCAP of $7.4 million. So those increases have supported our ability to fund programs and actions. Currently, where we're at with our estimated actuals from last year, Goal 1, Action 1, you can see where we built the budget at $350,000, but the actuals expenditures were $585,000. Goal 1, Action 2, estimated budget we started with was $638,000. The actual budgeted expenditures as of the actuals was at about 2.1 million, but 927,000 is to be reimbursed. So our IT department, and this is where a lot of our IT needs have come through, and the increase of pricings for our Chromebooks and our hotspots, we're being reimbursed for our one-time purchase of those $900,000 worth of Chromebooks we got that we are able to send home to our students. But also the increase of pricing. So our budget for next year will be, we're budgeting for $1.1 million. Goal 1, Action 3, part of this goal is for school safety, providing safe and appropriate learning environments for students. Some of those items under that action can be moved into the Goal 4 and reducing some of the Goal 1, Action 3 and moving it into the that budget under Goal 4. So that budget for next year, we're proposing to be 430 instead of over 500,000. We've moved about 100, I think we're gonna move about 150 into Goal 4, one of those actions there. And then Goal 1, Action 4 is our grade span reductions for our FTE teachers, keeping our ratios down that everybody loves that we do. Goal 2, Action 1, you can see where our EL specialists are under that. We've moved some of our applications that are specific that we've purchased, Elevation and some of our other supports that have supported our students. We've moved them into some of these intervention actions out of Action 5. So that way it's more transparent that it's supporting our unduplicated counts. And so you can see where our expenditures were and where our expenditures have gone up. And on Goal 1 and Goal 2, Action 1 and Goal 2, Action 2, those are really deep part of our intervention programs right there. Goal 2, Action 3 are more of our enrichments, our field trips, our athletic programs for the elementary and middle school. Our expenditures weren't as high this year, partly due because of the COVID. We didn't roll things out as quickly. Such as athletics at the elementary schools, and our field trips weren't quite as expansive until the last month of May when everybody wanted a field trip every day. But also the availability of buses were also havoc on our field trip availabilities last year. So we'll still be making sure that that is supported financially. with the support of Goal 4, Goal 2, Action 4, this is where our SEL materials and counselors and counseling services were coming out of. What we're proposing is moving that entire action and funding for that action into Goal 4. And then our applications that support, our general applications that support our students is our Goal 2, Action 5. And then Goal 3, Dr. Summers Prather-Smith's favorite goal, is our family parent engagement for our sites in our district. And this goal was also supported by some of our one-time grants. So the expenditures of this goal will still be continued next year, being supported out of our one-time grants with all the and also some of this would also be out of Goal 4 with our community partners of restorative practices, and then all of our new coalition with our Goal 4. So the proposed Goal 4, cultivate a safe, inclusive, and restorative environment within all schools and classrooms with a focus on equity, anti-racism, and anti-bias at the core of the whole child support. Looking at 3 actions and budgeting those 3 actions accordingly here. Action 1, implementing anti-bias, equity, and anti-racism policies and practices and building school leaders and staff capacity. Approximate budget would be about $200,000. And again, some of these are also supported out of our one-time grants as we're building capacity. Goal for Action 2 would be implementing restorative practices. And Goal 3 would be creating a positive learning community through the provision of mental health support and trauma-informed practices. And a lot of that funding would come out of that Goal 2, Action 4 that we would close down and move to here, where we'd move our counselors and our supports and our SEL community learning. With that, I propose that we bring for board approval June 22nd, the LCAP with 4 goals. And cultivating a safe, inclusive, restorative environment within all schools and classrooms with a focus on equity and anti-racism, anti-bias basis at the core of the whole child support. Those 4 goals going into our LCAP for next year. So I'll be coming back to you for board approval of the current draft with edits for June 22nd. Of next year's LCAP. And with that, we thank you for all of the support, continuing the impacts from this year of COVID-19. And despite these challenges, our district has stayed committed to implementing the LCAP and one-time grants to provide the necessary services to our staff and students. And we want to thank all of our educational partners, teachers, staff, students, parents, administrators, and community for their dedication and commitment to our district. The resilience of our students, teachers, and staff has been so impressive the last couple years, and this year, especially fully demonstrating that we are the little district that can and does. So thank you. Any discussion? I appreciate your thoughts.
Sure. Is there any questions or comments from the public? Feedback?
No, there's nothing.
Okay. Or from the sitting public? No, okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, can you bring up the 3rd slide to the end? It was where it actually listed the revisions. Yeah.
Is there any way you can zoom that in?
While she does that, I just wanted to mention one piece about Goal 4 is that our June 16th meeting with our community partners, we will be finalizing that with them as well, the language within that. So in that invite that you saw, you might have seen that that meeting will finalize Goal 4.
I've been playing with the language and the actions and exact budget lines, but it's pretty close.
Andrew, is that the one you wanted to see?
Yes, please.
But could you
Put it in
do that full screen?
presentation.
Yeah, I know you guys have been doing.
Okay.
Oh,
no worries.
there it is. I know you guys have been doing amazing with the parent participation piece of that. And what kind of engagement level are we doing with the teachers and staff to get their input in the LCAP?
We have the surveys, the Healthy Kids surveys that we've done. We've also had the LCAP presentations that we've also had teachers involved in. as well as our curriculum council, our DLACs, our ELACs, and our staff meetings and school site councils. And
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to ask, because on goal 3, it says increase parent and community engagement. You know, I see us doing those things with the teachers, but I think I'd like to see that we're also going to include our teachers and staff, because I don't see any mention of that specifically.
That's going to be a big part of goal 4. If you saw goal 4, action 1, it's an investment in supporting professional development and support with our teachers, really focused around our initiatives as well. So in that new goal 4 action, I think it's action 1.
it looks like action 1.
The goal itself is engagement with staff with, can you read it? I cannot.
Implement anti-bias, equity, and anti-racist policies and practices in building school leaders and staff capacity. So it's the training and implementation and transparency from the minute people walk on campus in their classrooms, and then looking at the data to make sure, looking at purchasing behavior flip, which I'll let Summer explain more.
I was just gonna say, I think what's really important about that goal is that what the feedback from staff was repeatedly is that they needed additional support around behavior, right? Rather that was supporting student behavior outside of the classroom, within the classroom. Teachers felt really confident in the academic aspects of their work, but they felt like that where we needed more additional support was the social, emotional, and behavioral supports for students. And so embedded within this goal is really looking at where those discipline issues are occurring and how we address them in a way that's anti-bias and anti-racist, right? As we look at that data. And so I think you're gonna, hopefully based on your question, see a lot of that work happening in this goal, because we did hear that from our staff.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense, because the teachers and staff are the ones on the ground. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, if there's any guidance, you know, as much outreach as we can do to them, you know, and get as
that's-
much feedback.
When we're looking at the drafting out this LCAP, we're like, something's missing. We're doing the work, but something's not being transparent that we're doing the work. And this year has really shown that from the shown what we've done, and I think bringing it to a goal 4 would be really more transparent.
We've had our first 3 LCAP goals my entire time here. Dr. White created those in 2015 with our community. Each year, our community has sort of analyzed those goals, wanted to keep those goals moving forward. And it really came out like Ms. Koenig said, that it's time that we sort of solidify and add another goal. We're bringing this to you during our public hearing, knowing that she's going to go work on the draft. I should say she reached out to our colleagues at MCOE to say, what does this look like if we wanted to add a goal? And they said it's the perfect time. If you've gotten your engagement and you're sort of creating that based on that feedback that you've received. But we wanted to get the board's feedback on doing this, because it would be changing a longstanding tradition of how our LCAP has had just the 3 goals. And so to get a discussion and a directive from you guys.
Yeah, and I think it's really, that's a great goal, because I know in speaking with some teachers who had issues for behavioral, they're like, well, Summer just sent us a breakdown of what we're actually doing, so it's nice to see that we're actually addressing these issues. So I think that communication piece that you're adding is great.
And I think what's also really important about this goal is that as we looked at it, what we heard repeatedly from teachers, from all staff, is that if we want to value it as a district, if we're going to invest in it, we want to see it in print, right? We want to see that it's there and that you're committed to making it happen. So last year we dabbled, I always say we put our toe into restorative practices, right? It was a voluntary opportunity. We kind of wanted people to get a feel for it. And what we heard back was, if you really want to do it, then commit to it. And so I think that this goal 4 really lays out those initiatives in a way that says we're committed to doing that work. And so here it is. We're committed to restorative practices. We're committed to social emotional wellness for our students and our staff. We're committed to providing an anti-racist, anti-bias learning environment for our students. And by putting it in print, right, and assigning funds to it, we know that what gets funded gets measured, and what gets measured gets done, right? And so I think this goal 4 does that for us.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my comments were, I'm a full support, and thank you for bringing it forward, because I think does make a difference that even though we were doing it already, it doesn't spell it out.
It's-
People need to see it.
It's transparent to our
Yeah, it's
unduplicated
transparent, yeah.
population as well. And when our secretaries are like, okay, we're buying this, but where do we fund it out of? I'm like, well, really, it's not in the LCAP. And it also is transparent to the strategic plan. So that's really important to it. It better aligns to where we're going.
And I think it also addresses a lot of the issues that, I mean, this affects learning. I mean, if we don't have that safe environment where students feel comfortable, and aren't being stressed by all this stuff that's kind of going on, it affects learning. Not just for the students affecting it, but if there's students that aren't understanding their actions and how they're impacting other students as well, it affects the teachers as well. So thank you for bringing it forward, and we do look forward to seeing it on the final draft. And yeah.
It will absolutely be on the final draft.
Okay. All right. At this time, it's 7:41, and I'll be closing the public hearing. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, moving on to item 13.1, information regarding the response to the 2021-2022 Monterey County Civil Grand Jury Final Report, Excellence in Action, Monterey County's Educational Response to COVID-19.
I put this item on as an informational first so we could kind of look at it, if there were any other adjustments we wanted to make. So the mission of the civil grand jury in California, of course, is to examine county and city governments as well as districts and other offices in order to ensure that the responsibilities of the entities are conducted lawfully and efficiently. They're also responsible for recommending measures for improving the functioning and accountability of these organizations, which are intended to serve the public interest. We are required to respond to the final report within 90 days, and the grand jury report is titled Excellence in Action, Monterey County's Educational Response to COVID-19. It's a joint response of the Monterey County Superintendent of Schools and Monterey County Board of Education. And each district has been asked to respond to the grand jury report, affirming their findings and recommendations. And so, just to give you a brief summary, the grand jury report found that Monterey County Office of Education and Monterey County School Districts handled the COVID-19 emergency very well. Our staff stepped in. They highlight classified staff, they highlight certificated staff, administrative staff, as well as the connections with other agencies to get our community access to much needed supplies all throughout the pandemic, and found that even when information was slow in getting to us, the school districts moved as quickly as possible to meet the needs of our community. So I was just putting it here in case there was some discussion or you would like me to add anything else to our Santa Rita response.
Is there any additional questions or comments from the
No,
board?
I read through it. I think it was great responses. I mean, I just appreciate, everything was just laid out there. So everything was clear. And
Okay. I'll bring it back for approval at our next meeting then.
Yeah, and I just want to, I know, like for everybody watching, the public and stuff, is initially when I read it, it's, we're thinking about like what happened. It's like things didn't go perfect. I think what we're looking at is, did the school districts and everything adjust as best as they could? Because this was something that's never happened in the history, at least in our lifetime. And so, of course, there was going to be a lot of holes in learning and holes in access and technology and everything, because everybody was just trying to take it as a whim. I was reading the report, I was reminded when we had the board meeting that we're going to close down the schools, and you're telling all the teachers now, hey, go home and try to teach from home and make the kids learn. It's like, what? I've been teaching for 20 years and I don't know how to do online, because of course that's not your specialty. You haven't been trained, you haven't had the experience. So of course for the community there was learning loss, unfortunately. And unfortunately our children are going to suffer for those 2 years, that they were out, and it's going to be a huge adjustment to kind of get back to where it was before. But I think what this kind of shows is everybody did diligently do the best they could given the circumstances and the situations that they were. And that's what we want to commend everybody for and thank everybody, is that stuff happened. We have learning loss and we're working through it, but we did make our best efforts through it. So
Thank you. That's well said.
thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to 13.2, discussion of the July board workshop.
We started last year in July with a board workshop to go over our strategic action plan, created that. And this would give us a chance to check in on year one progress. We know some things were a little slower, sometimes due to furniture deliveries and all of those things, but check in on where we're at with them, what things we might carry over and continue into year two, but they weren't completed, and what things we might want to add, and keep it as a 3-year plan going. Also to look at our facilities 5-year planning, prioritizing identified items and doing those things. It just would allow us a little more time to sit and digest those things. One proposal, we could do it again on a weekend, or it would be transitioning one of our July meetings into a board workshop. And I feel confident that we could easily transition our first July meeting from being a regular board meeting into a board workshop if the board wanted to do that instead of a Saturday.
What are the thoughts, us three that are here?
What kind of
So we would pretty much
hours
break
are
it
we
down
talking
between
about?
two, right? It would break it down between 2 meetings to do it, or you were thinking just one?
So we would just transition our first July meeting. Instead of being a regular meeting, it would be a board workshop. And so we could take we could start at 5 o'clock and go 5 till 8 and really dig into these things. I believe our July workshop that we did on a Saturday last year was about 3 hours. That gave us a good amount of time.
So you said July 1st? Is that a?
It'll be
13th? Oh,
July
okay.
13th meeting if the board wanted to do that. And so I would just need the direction. And then at our next meeting, when you're going to announce the following meeting, you would announce it as a board workshop instead of our next regular meeting. And we could put that in our agenda. Either way.
I'm okay with the July 13th. I mean, the Saturday was nice, but it's a Saturday too, so I think
Yeah.
July 13th.
Yeah, July 13th.
Okay,
is
yeah,
fine.
I will go with that then. Yeah.
Okay. And we could start at earlier if you wanted to, if you wanted a 5
Sure. What do you think? I mean, how much digestion do we need, for
Well, I think if we do start, 5 is good. Earlier, yeah, because I
5?
think once
Yeah.
we get to a certain date, time, we're a
Okay.
little fried.
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
our retaining
I
of.
wouldn't want to start later than 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But thank you so much.
Okay, so our next regular board meeting will be June 22nd, 2022. And then now we have 14.2 suggested future board items. So out of the presentations that happened today, I feel like we need a bigger TV or screen.
Now that we no longer need to do the serving out of
Okay.
here, I just wrote Becky a little note saying we can move the big TV out now.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Yeah,
Oh,
because I know even for ourselves and the public, I
Same.
think, and it's here.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one item I'm requesting.
Thank you.
Any other suggested future board items? No. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn at 7:48? Were you saying? No. Yeah. Okay. 7:48.
I move to adjourn?
Second,
Okay. Roll call, please.
Andrew Sandoval,
Aye.
Elva Ariano,
aye.
Jacob Sandoval.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening.